Hey, this is Zero at ReviewZoneHD, and I'm bringing you guys a review for the PlayStation 3 version of Assassin's Creed 3, which is an action-adventure sandbox title with both RPG and stealth elements. It was developed by Ubisoft Montreal, with the main story being based around the American Revolution from the years 1753 to 1783. History buffs will certainly appreciate the amount of detail placed in both the historical figures and the event recreations of the time period. I've already announced I believed it could win Game of the Year. It's received pretty high praise from most big review companies, but there are a few downsides that do knock it down a peg or two. I have a lot to say about this one, so let's go ahead and get it started. This is the best looking title that I've played this year, and I've played some pretty nice looking games. It uses a brand new engine that was built from the ground up, with the wiki stating that the engine is said to utilize the full capability of current generation systems to deliver a next generation Assassin's Creed experience. And I'll have to admit there were moments playing that this title felt like it was running on the next PlayStation console. The naval battle sequences were absolutely breathtaking, and the amount of moving NPCs and particle effects during some sequences had me surprised the frame rate was able to stay stable at all, but it does come with a cost. This game had more graphical issues than any other title I've played this year, with the exception of the original Naughty Bear game, but that's a funny story for another day. While the emotions shown on character faces during the cutscenes were great, the lip syncing was the biggest glaring issue to discuss, with one forum user describing it as they look like talking Muppets. Most of the cutscenes ran fine, but outside of the cutscenes you're better off looking away from the screen when the characters talk to one another. I did notice the frame rate drop on occasion, and there were some weird spaz out moments from both twitching NPCs and from my own character. I saw texture pop-ins, including some weird flashes of textures that didn't belong on the screen at all, and also oddly enough texture pop-outs, as I saw some NPC characters in town disappear completely from right in front of me. But I never experienced a game freeze or an issue that was so bad that it took away from the overall experience of an otherwise outstanding looking game. You can nitpick away on the bugs, but there's no denying this is a great looking title.
Hey! You talking to yourself again? Man, I worry about your sanity sometimes.
If you didn't play the previous game, the beginning of this one may be a little confusing, and yes, it does contain the save the world cliché storyline to open things up with. And graphics aside, the first two chapters are a complete snorefest as you watch a cutscene, take a few steps, watch another cutscene, take a few more steps, rinse and repeat until you're left wondering if the game is ever really going to get going. But the story does get much better once you hit sequence 4, and it begins tossing twists your way that I didn't see coming. It also has an underlying plot line that's actually worth paying attention to. Without spoiling or giving away any major plot details, you do end up playing as 3 different characters, and you get to watch 2 of them evolve as years pass by. The main character you spend the most time with is the most interesting out of the group, shows the most personality, and is the easiest to get attached to. So while it may be hard to see the purpose behind how the game begins, just rest assured it has a point and purpose behind it, and in the end you'll be glad that you sat through it. Where do I even begin in this category? Forget the main story, the cutscenes, the overall drive behind the game for a moment. They've added so much to do on here that you can spend a crazy amount of time just playing the mini games, bartering, building up your homestead, upgrading your ship, and running side missions with it, and the hunting deserves an entire bit of commentary by itself. When Red Dead Redemption released, a couple writers that were already working on the hunting system for this game were surprised that it resembled what they were working on so closely, so they really had to up the ante on this part of the game, and they definitely succeeded. You can track, bait, snare, and outright sneak up on your prey, and it works flawlessly. If you want to do some hunting, don't bother with the Cabela series, just do your animal slaughtering on here. Not only is the hunting functional, but you get to do it in one of the best looking environments that you're going to come across in any game released to date. As far as the main story missions go, the green dot used to guide your way is perfect. It shows where you need to go without really being too intrusive, and it always led me in the proper direction. The combat system is also another bright spot worth checking out. When it's running properly, it provides some very brutal, satisfying kills as you dance your way back and forth between a crowd of enemies, but it's not perfect. There were occasions that it felt just a little off, but as with everything else that I've nitpicked about, you're going to care a lot less about the little iffy flaws when you see how well it performs the other 90% of the time. The optional objectives used during the missions are great in theory and give some purpose to replay a few missions if you're a perfectionist or if you're just bored, and they add a few extra ways to challenge yourself, but they can also be controller fling worthy annoying as well. Running through a city filled with people as you chase someone down with an optional objective of not bumping into anyone comes to mind, so you're going to need a little patience and a few retries to complete all the optional objectives, but I didn't run across any that seemed overly difficult. While this entire review is focused on the single player campaign, it does give you plenty of reasons to take it online. I've done a couple of videos showcasing and discussing the online features, but long story short, the upgrades, different modes, stable servers, and unique fun gameplay not found outside of the Assassin's Creed series will keep most people busy long after they've completed the game. And the title that I can most relate this game to is actually my favorite on the PlayStation 3 with Red Dead Redemption, which took around 15 to 20 hours to complete the main story on there if you didn't stop to smell the roses too much, and it appears as if Assassin's Creed 3 is clocking in close to that same time to complete, depending on how much time you spend playing outside of the main missions. If you're speeding through this game, expect to complete it in about 12 to 13 hours, but with the amount of content found outside of the main story, it should provide at least 30 hours of enjoyment before things start to slow down and you move over to the online modes. Also, how great is it that I could focus an entire review on all the other stuff this game does well without ever discussing the climbing and running mechanics that the previous Assassin's Creed titles are notorious for. Yes, it's still in the game, yes, it's been streamlined and it works well most of the time, but it really takes a backseat to everything else that you're doing, and it felt more like a privilege than a chore this time around. In closing, I do think this one lived up to the hype. It gives enough reasons for a day one purchase and should please even the most pickiest of gamers out there, including people like me who have to point out all the flaws in every game that I play. Anyways, this is Zero at ReviewZoneHD, and thanks for stopping by.